we've always been doing here.
That's right.
So,
First name.
I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Jennifer Botzo-Jorns. I am a former high school math teacher, then became the principal, and now I am the coordinator of curriculum for our supervisory union, which means I get to go around and visit all the schools and all the math classrooms and work with teachers and help plan the learning that's going on in the classroom. The purpose of tonight is to have you sort of dive into some of the math thinking so you understand the learning that's going on with teachers in the schools. And we have our 3 math professional developers here, and I need to tell you, and I'm not just saying this, they're the best professional developers in the state, if not the country. And I really mean that. So Mary Austin, who's on the far right here, she can introduce herself, but she travels all over the country and internationally training in the ongoing assessment project in math, and we are blessed to have her in our middle schools 3 days a week. Karen Reinhardt has worked all over Vermont, taught courses in Vermont, and people are always calling us up saying, can you please come work for our district? And she works at Jericho Elementary School and also consults in all of our other schools and has people come in and learn how to look at data. And then Christian Cordemanche works in all of our elementary schools and works with our teachers on how to perfect their teaching practice. And it's just, I feel very lucky to work with them, and they're going to walk through some pretty exciting pieces here. One of the things that happens when we have these nights is a couple people show up, a handful of people, and you leave saying, oh my gosh, this was really good. So when we do it again next year, tell all your friends and relations that they should come. I think you'll get a lot out. So there's a sign-in sheet. Where's the sign-in sheet? Here. It's over here. If everyone could just sign in, that would be great, and I'll turn it over to the crew. Thank you.
A couple of housekeeping items before we start. I have to set a timer for myself. Is that you'll notice on your table you have a couple of different sheets of paper. There are some colorful index cards and there's some blank white pieces of paper. You can't have a math night without blank white pieces of paper. The colorful index cards are if you have a burning question that you would love to have answered, jot it down and set it on the table so that you don't forget it. If you have a clarifying question about something that's being said that you want rephrased or you want some more information about that thought, feel free to raise your hand and just shout that one out. We'd love to answer those, but if you're like, ooh, this makes me think of this and I would love to ask that at the end, please go ahead and write that down, and we would love to answer those questions kind of towards the end. So what brings us here tonight at a CESU district math night? And so a lot of folks are kind of coming under this presupposition that math has changed. My kids are coming home, things are looking a little bit different. Math seems to have changed in my household. And so what we are going to be talking about tonight is it's not so much that math has changed. Actually, math is kind of the same. Math has not changed. Math has not changed, but our core beliefs about math have changed over the past 50 years, and that's why you might see things that look different from when you were a kid or if you have older students. Over the past 50 years, a lot of research has been done in a variety of in a variety of areas. One of the areas is in education. Educators have been researching how math instruction might look different. Additionally, neuropsychologists are looking at how math might look different as we learn about how we learn things, how we remember things, how we recall things. And so over time, these research pieces have come out and they've caused us to have a core belief shift. And so I imagine you have core beliefs about a lot of different things, and you equally have core beliefs about math. And these core beliefs affect how we think about things, how we act, what we deem important or less important about what we see in mathematics. And we and our professional development work as a district have core beliefs about math too. And so what we kind of want to start this evening doing is kind of unpacking what are your core beliefs about math? And how have they shifted over time? So what do you think about math? What are your core beliefs and for your own children? So what I'd like you to do is on one of those colorful index cards, if we can have pencils go around if they haven't yet, I'd like you to jot a note. What do you think it means to be good at math? What do you think that it means to be good at math? What are your core beliefs about proficiency in math? I'd encourage you to think too about the dispositions of someone who is good at math. Not just, oh wow, they got all the way to calculus or they did math in college, but what are the dispositions of someone who is very good at math, very proficient in math. So take a moment at the folks, say hello to the folks at your table, introduce yourself. Take a moment and share some of those characteristics of someone you found who was good at math.
Hi, I'm Helen Ann Kennedy.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. How do you know when somebody's good at math? What do you think it means to be good at math? What do you think it means? What's the goal?
Working with what kind of struggles is she working on?
Gate has a 7th grade.
Okay. Great. So
Access to some of that paper. So, shuffling around to different tables, I heard a variety of different thoughts, and there was a kind of a repeating theme of, I'm trying to help my child with their work, and they're saying, Daddy, that's not how we're learning it in school. There seems to be a theme of this going on, and so our hope is that by the end of the night, that will become part of the conversation as well. But I really want to think deeply about what do we think it means to be good at math. And each one of us tonight is going to be sharing a core belief based on this question. And so based on this idea that we have some ideas that were really prevalent a while ago about what it meant to be good at math. And the three of us have spent a lot of time exploring the research, both educationally as well as brain science and how kids are learning math, as well as we've really looked at what adult professions look for when looking for somebody who's proficient in math. We've spent a great deal of time really exploring that. And then the last piece, I would say, that's kind of looking up here and looking down. The last piece is we've spent a great deal of time looking bottom up. How do kids come to school understanding math? And how can we build upon that? And so, even though math has not changed, our core beliefs about math has changed. And it's based on research. And therefore, math instruction has changed. Math has not changed, but math instruction has changed. So the math problems that you're seeing have been around forever, but the way that we're talking about them might look a little bit different than what you were used to. So our hope here is that by the end of tonight, I'm going to be sharing one cultural belief that we used to think that has kind of shifted over time. Karen's going to come up and talk about another cultural belief that has shifted over time, and Mary's going to talk about a third cultural belief that we felt about math that's shifted out over time. All three of us are going to use a math problem as an example to illustrate that shift, as well as talk about why we currently think the way we do about math. And so our hope at the end of this night is that you too will have a shift in your thinking, that you too will grow as we've grown over the past years to think about what we believe to be true about learning mathematics, and then also that will trickle down to your child, that your child will have healthy core beliefs about math. And then ultimately, we would love to see cultural shifts and greater societal shifts about what people believe to be true about math. And so I kind of want to just end with this notion that the three things we're going to look at tonight are things that have been prevalent over the past 50 years in math. The first one that we're going to really explore is this notion that there's really one best way to solve a math problem. That's something that a lot of folks have believed to be true over time, that there's really one way to solve a problem. A second thought that has been very prevalent in the United States is math learning is about memorizing. That's a core thing about math. Math is all about memorizing. And then the last thing is in mathematics, you either got it or you don't. You either understand it or you don't, is another thing that we're going to be really tackling. These are the three main topics we're going to be talking about tonight. And I would just kind of note this, that it's changed, and it's changed in a good way. If you had an ailment and you went to a doctor's practice and it looked like this, you would say, I don't know that this is the best practice for me. We've learned a lot about medicine over the past 50 years. There have been a lot of advancements in research about health and medicine in the past 50 years. If you were going to a doctor and they were still practicing medicine the way they did 50 years ago, you might scratch your head and say, I don't know that this is the most current research. I don't know that this is really where I want to place my hands. And so also, when we're thinking about math, I don't know that I really want to see us ignore research that has happened over the past 50 years. Things have changed and evolved in what we know about kids. And so that's a little bit about what we're thinking about tonight. So let's get into the first core belief. Math instruction has changed. So there's this core belief society right now that there's really one best way to solve a problem. I don't know if that's a belief that you hold, that you have, that when you think about a particular math problem, like, oh, there's a good way to solve this. Let me show you as you're talking to your child. Let me show you how to solve this problem. Here's the problem. Okay, let me show you how to do it. Here we go. There's one way to solve a problem. And what the research shows and what we really believe is that there are actually many ways. There are many ways to solve a problem. That there's a variety of ways that we can look at problems. If you look at a textbook from the 50s, you might see something like this. You know, go solve all of the even problems on page 47. And this is presuming that there's one good way to solve them, and now that you've learned that one good way, go regurgitate it a bajillion times. And that's how math looked. That's how we were taught math. Go learn this trick, now go reiterate it over and over and over again, and just crank through it, sometimes mindlessly. But what we believe is that math might not be looking like this in these days. That there was a time when we'd say, well, there's a way that math ought to be done. Math ought to be taught this way, or you ought to solve this problem this way, and just this way. And so how our thinking has changed over time is that though there may be just one answer to math, there are many ways to get to that answer. There are many approaches. When I'm reading a newspaper, if I come to a word that I don't understand, am I stuck? If I come to a newspaper, is there only one way I can figure out that word? Or are there many ways that I can figure out that word? Do I always sound it out? You know, when I was a kid, what I always remember is the teacher saying, sound it out, sound it out. You know, for reading, if you didn't know the word, try to sound it out. And then you get to a word you can't sound out, and then you're toast. What do? In reading, we've really understood that there's a variety of ways to figure out a word if you don't know. You can look at the context of the sentence. You can look for patterns in spelling. You can look at prefixes and suffixes. You can look at other words. Think about other words that are similar. You can look at what is the greater meaning of the paragraph and allow that to help you figure out what that word means. In reading, we don't just memorize every single word in the dictionary. In math, it's the same way. We don't memorize every single math problem that you see. Instead, there's a portion of things that we learn so that we can apply, so that we can look for patterns. The bulk of reading is applying. If you were still sounding out every single word as your one strategy when you read a newspaper, it'd take a very long time to read just one article. And I believe that math is very similar. That there's more than one way. There's more than one way in reading than just sounding it out. There's more than one way in math. If you know the word and, you can apply that to knowing sand and hand. If you know could, you can apply that to would and should. In the same way, if you know 8 plus 7, you can apply that to 18 plus 7 or 8 plus 17. If you know 8 times 7, you can apply that to 80 times 7 or 8 times 70. You memorize the facts, but you do so that you can apply them, so that you have a variety of ways to enter into a problem, a variety of different strategies. So if you have a child who's maybe in 2nd grade or 3rd grade and is coming home saying, why am I memorizing the multiplication facts, or why am I memorizing the addition facts? There's this notion of if you're still sounding out all of these facts, if you're still solving out all of these facts as you go forward in the grade levels, it's going to take you a very long time, and you might lose sight of what the greater problem is. We memorize facts so that we can apply them to greater tasks, but we don't memorize every fact. And sometimes we can't sound things out. Going back to the reading analogy, sometimes, even if you've memorized certain words, there are other words you just can't sound out. And if you were only taught one way, if that core belief, there's only one way to solve a problem, if you were only taught one way, then what do? You ask Google. What is this word? But I can't ask Google because I can't say that one because I don't know how it sounds. But you could type it into Google. So the question is, are there other ways to figure out what this word says and means? Are there other ways? We can look at the context. We can look at patterns. We could read the greater sentence and see if that will give us any clues on what this word means. The same is true of mathematics. Mathematics is about looking at context and looking at patterns so that we can make sense of the problem. A lot of the discussions that are happening in school right now are looking at, is the way that you're attacking this problem efficient? Is it accurate? Are you thinking flexibly about this? Because in the same way that this doesn't have just one strategy, you have to figure out a good strategy that helps you figure out this word. The same is true for mathematics. We need kids who are thinking flexibly about mathematics so that when they see a certain problem, they might approach it differently than when they saw another problem. You know, my father's a carpenter, and he keeps a lot of tools. He keeps a lot of tools in his tool bag, and not every project is the same. The tools are the same, but not every project is the same, and he needs to know when to take out a certain tool according to what project he's working on. Mathematics can be very similar to this, that we memorize a certain bank of tools, but much of the math thinking that's going on is figuring out what tool to bring out for which problem we're working on. And I want to illustrate this with an actual problem. This is going to come, I'm going to skip over that for time. This is going to come from a 2nd and 3rd grade classroom. So if you're here as a parent of an elementary student, you might see problems like this going home. And what I'd like you to do is this. I'm going to ask you to solve this problem for me, and I would like you to not use paper. I would like you to do this mentally. In 3rd grade, we would have students solve this mentally. And my hope is that this will illustrate this shift, as there's one way and there is many ways to solve a problem. So I'm going to give you 15 seconds to solve this problem. If you think you have an answer to this problem, I'd like you to go like this. And we'll talk about strategies in a moment. So, ask Google. All right, I'm going to call on some folks. Answers to this problem, go ahead.
238.
238. Other answers that have not been said that you got that were not 238.
240 minus 2.
240 minus 2, which would get you to?
238.
All right, now I'd like to call on some folks. How did you solve this? And I'm going to try to illustrate your approach to solving this problem. How did you go about solving this mentally? Go ahead.
120 plus 120 minus 2.
$120 plus 120 got you to?
240. Yeah.
Yep. 240 minus 2 got you to?
238.
238. Did somebody do this a different way? What's your first name?
Barry.
Barry. We'll call this Barry's way. A different way. Yes?
So I added 19 and 19 and then 1 and 1.
19 plus 19 was?
38.
38. Can you explain more? You said I added 1 and 1.
Well, I just knew that 19 and 19 was 38, and then I
Ooh, there's a touchscreen board up here.
knew I didn't need to carry the 1, so I knew that the 2 ones were 2.
Can someone add to that thinking? When she's talking about I added 1 and 1 equal 2, what does she mean when she's saying that?
Took 100 plus 100.
100 plus 100? How did you know she meant that?
That's what I thought. And well, it's in the hundreds place.
Is in the hundreds place? Other strategies. Oh, and what was your first name?
Leslie.
Leslie. Other strategies. Did somebody take this a different way? Yes?
119 times 2
which I guess breaks down to 100 times 2 plus 19 times 2.
Yikes.
Which is 100 times 2, which equals?
200.
And 19
He's good at
times
math,
2?
isn't he?
19 times 2?
38.
Thank you. Line there, 200 plus 38. First name?
Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. With a what?
G.
With a G. Geoff or Geff?
First one.
Any others out there? Yeah!
I just added the hundreds, the tens, the ones.
Hundreds, tens, and ones. How did it sound?
100 plus 100, 10 plus 10, 9 plus 9.
Did you then think this way? Vertically?
I think so.
Thanks. First name?
Laura.
Laura. One last one.
I regrouped them so that it was 120 plus 118.
Great. Thanks. Going way down here. 120 plus 118.
And I knew that would work because I just took one from the 119, one of the 119s and gave it to the other, and it was friendlier to work with.
It was friendlier to work with. The numbers got friendly. I have a friend who went into accounting. He was a social worker and he went into accounting because he said the numbers were friendlier. So apparently these numbers, there are numbers that are friendlier. What did you do when you got to 120 plus 118?
I added them together. I knew that 120 plus 100 is 220. And then 220 or plus 8. I'm sorry, I can't see the
Sorry.
18. I just knew that 20 plus 18 was 88.
Great. A great question that I often ask elementary students, I work K4, is when they say, I just knew it. Very common. Well, I just knew it. How did you know it was correct? How did you know it was correct? It's a great response. If you have a child who says, I just knew it, how did you know it was correct when you say you just knew it? A variety of different ways. Did anyone pull out a scrap piece of paper?
Okay, I didn't say anything because I was like, oh my God.
Oh wait, I'm going to just interrupt. I didn't get your name.
Noreen.
Thanks, Noreen. Okay.
Did no one really, like, in their mind, put 119 over 119 and just do it?
That was my question. Did anybody?
Really? We're all the same
Did anybody do that? 119 and imagine it like a
It
picture?
was a picture. It was just like that.
Like-
Add the 9s, carry the 1.
18, 3,
Yes, that's what I thought. That's exactly what I did.
I was wondering if anyone was going to do that. Is that what you did, Karen?
No, I said true confession.
True confessions. There we go. So
I know, it's like, wait a minute, I am old school then, so. yeah.
there's a variety of ways.
And it worked.
Could I? This is not like an embarrassing question. Could I raise of hands? How many folks did think of it this way? Kind of pictured it in their mind as an equation. All right. There's a variety of ways to solve a problem. If I was in a grocery store with my child, I typically don't pull out a scrap piece of paper. If I have $20 in my wallet and I have 3 different items at the grocery store, I typically don't pull out a scrap piece of paper and do that. I typically think in a variety of different ways according to the numbers of the problem. We started with Barry. If I was a classroom teacher, I would have called on Barry last. And the reason for that is Barry adjusted the numbers in a way that made sense for him, that it made the problem just go snap like that for him. He took 119 and 119, turned it into 120 and 120, and the work is done. The work is done. As opposed to thinking of all of the steps of the traditional US algorithm, Barry just adjusted the numbers in his mind and figured it out. There were a variety of ways that we solved this problem. And so when a child comes home and says, can you help me solve this problem? Is there one way? Or are there a variety of ways? Are we trying to get kids to think about the numbers in the problem. Because this problem, 119 and 119, lended itself to some friendly thinking, some friendly numbers, are we teaching kids to look for those? So I brought a couple of student examples, and then I'm going to turn it over to Karen. This is a third grade class. I just randomly popped in. We asked this question of some third graders, and this is how they solved it. And I want you to take a look. Somebody said I did each part of the different place value. I looked at each piece. Touch screen. Thanks, Mary. I'm not going to touch it anymore. There. Somebody had mentioned this. Oop, I'm going to do it again. I got to back up. Sure. Laura here. Take a look at similarities between this student and Laura. Adding by place. Spacebar. Take a look at what this kid did. We did not have this strategy in our room. That is how that student saw the problem in a way that could make it simple and quick and efficient. They were flexible in their thinking. They thought, oh, I'm really great with 110, 110. The converse to this, if we go to the next one, how is this one different? And you can spacebar it, I put them side by side. The commutative property of addition, what's beautiful is that kids are able to think flexibly in their thinking. This student is thinking like the algorithm. Let's start in the ones place and go this way. This student is thinking left to right, though. Is there only one way to solve this problem? Spacebar again. I'm comparing the previous strategy where they did 110 and 110 and 9. Another kid, same classroom. 100, 100, 19, 19. That was quicker, more simple, more efficient to get that answer to rattle off. And then as we draw closer and closer to this, we have some strategies that take you along the way. Mary? Go. Thanks. Take a look at how this guides you to this. Sometimes kids learn this and they carry the one and they have no idea what that one means. Take a look at how each part is listed out here to get you to this endpoint. And even closer transitionally, the last one that I'll show, take a look at what this student has done. It's very, very close to the traditional US algorithm, but take a look at this, 2, 2, 18. One up here to get us to our answer. There was a cultural script that there was one way, one best way to solve a problem. And I would hope that as we've thought about today and with this illustration and with the other two illustrations we're going to see tonight, a certain way better than another. And we want to provide kids, just like with reading, a variety of strategies to solve a math problem. But the most important thing that we want them to do is think. We want them to stop and think, what's this problem asking? Can I work with these numbers in a way that makes it more friendly? So I'm going to invite Karen to come up and talk about a second cultural script. Actually, the next slide says big ideas. I just want to kind of just wrap up with our instruction that we're doing in schools supports this cultural shift, supports this core belief. Depending on the context of the problem, the numbers in the problem, looking for ways to be more accurate, efficient, and flexible, our instruction is that we encourage students to look at the context of the problem. We encourage that innovation, that creativity in solving out problems. And we allow students to grab onto the strategies that makes most sense for them. Just like for a lot of you, you gravitated to a strategy that made most sense for you. And I would just end in saying some of the power in this is that if you were to visit a classroom, you wouldn't hear one voice and a lot of pencils. You would hear a variety of voices encouraging and spurring on one another to think differently about a problem. Karen.
Can I have just one question?
Yeah.
With all of this said, does that mean that our kids in America are steps beyond what we used to be, mathematically speaking, 50 years ago?
That's a great question. I think that the work that we're pushing towards, that work that we're having discussions with classroom teachers as professional developers, is are we having kids pause and look at the problem so that they don't pull out their phone when they're thinking about leaving a tip, so they can think flexibly about that. according to the numbers that are for that particular math problem. But
So a lot of what we're dealing here is not necessarily getting onto calculus and trigonometry and nuclear or whatever, but being able to do basic math and principles.
that's a great question, and I might say it's not an either or.
Okay.
That it's a both and, that we are encouraging kids to think about the math and come at problems in a variety of ways. We're encouraging them to be flexible, which is going to produce adults who then are shopping very informed. If you think about the amount of math that you do in your everyday life, most of what you're doing is estimating and adjusting and trying to decide if something is reasonable. Most of the math that we do works a lot with numbers, with money. And so we want to kind of eyeball it and then adjust. And so it's producing that. Additionally, by having flexible thinkers, we're allowing kids to go forward in math and get into more complex problems because they can do this fluently. And like with sounding it out and reading, they're not sounding out every single problem.
Can I ask something, actually, because this is great. I mean, I'm all for multiple different ways of getting to an answer. I think that's fantastic. However, I'm here because when my son comes home and I try to show him a different way, it is a hold the phone, Mom. That is not allowed. This is not the way. He doesn't feel like, oh, yeah, that's great. Give me another new way to think about this. He's saying, no, you need to go away now. I'm going to cry for a little while and figure it out on my own. So I guess I'm not sure if what we're saying here is that there's lots of ways and you guys are supporting that and that they're open to that, or if there really is one way you just haven't gotten us to that is better. This is just a lot of
Yeah, Mary wants to feel that one.
The piece that I'm going to talk about at the end is this idea of the progression of learning. It's not that we don't want our kids to end with very efficient algorithms that work every time. That's where we need to get to. But in order for that to be sticking, I work in the middle schools, and I've seen kids who've learned by the time they get to 8th grade lots of algorithms, and they're saying things to me like, is this when I invert and multiply?
Right.
Or do I just, they're trying to remember when the rules go versus understanding those rules. So it's the idea of building an algorithm, building that through understanding. So it's still the goal, but it's not the initial goal.
Sure.
The other thing I want to say about calculus is when I took calculus, my professor said to me, people don't fail calculus. They fail calculus because they don't know arithmetic. It's those basic foundation pieces that you can flexibly apply in lots and lots of different ways that actually enables you to think about that higher mathematics. And actually what holds you back is that lack of flexibility. And I kept going, oh good, I'm good at flexible. I can be flexible on this. Yes, I'm trying to make sense of the new mathematics.
And I think actually what Karen's about to talk on is actually going to partially answer that question as well.
Yeah.
And we're all leaders, so we all want to keep talking about everything that everybody else talked about. The one comment I thought about when you asked about trying to get kids into calculus is I think our goal now is to have more kids doing that. So I think 50 years ago, there were maybe only some kids who had access to it. We want all kids to have access to it, and we believe that all kids can have access to it. We just feel like the instruction needs to change so that we are meeting more kids' needs so that they can go as far as everyone else. And I would say in terms of where I was 40 years ago, the kids that I'm working with are way beyond where I was in my math when I was 10. So I'm up there with them now, but luckily. Okay, so I'm Karen Reinhardt for folks who came in late, and I worked in the district K-8 in math, supporting teachers for a while, and now I am have the privilege of being the math coach at Jericho Elementary, which is really fun. I get to work more with kids than I did in the past. And I'm going to talk about this idea of math being more about memorizing, which was true for many of us, and we talked about it at my table, to shifting to understanding. And one of the things I wanted to say is all the things that the three of us are going to say are really interwoven. So you're going to hear a lot of the same themes, but hopefully in different contexts. So when Christian had that textbook up there with all of those problems, I was totally into that. I was a good memorizer, and to me, being able to learn that formula and crank it out and do 50 problems and feel satisfied that I had done them felt really good to me because I didn't have to think. When I had to write an English paper, I felt like I had to really think and I had to analyze and I had to compare and contrast, and that was harder for me. So I was kind of relieved to get to math and not have to think. And we really want kids to think. We want kids to understand. We want them to know why they're doing something, because chances are the thing that they're doing in 2nd grade is going to be built on in 3rd and 4th grade, and they're going to need to go back to that. So here's a quote. Just take a minute and read this. This is James Hebert, who has a PhD in math education and is an author of many different books on mathematics teaching and learning. So I'd like you to take a minute and think about an experience you had in math around rules for moving symbols around on paper. You might think about a trick that you learned or a mnemonic that you learned. So take a minute and think about probably more middle school and high school, but do you have some trick or some formula that you remember? So take a minute and think about that. And then quickly turn and talk at your tables. What's either a rule or a mnemonic?
So the one that I always remember is Sokotoa.
Oh, I know what it is.
So I love that there's all this conversation, because clearly folks have some experience with this. So let's just hear a couple. What's one that you remember? Anybody? Yeah. Keep it, switch it, flip it. Anybody remember that one? Or some variation of that?
Can you repeat that?
Keep it, switch it, flip it. And do you have a do you remember why you did that, or when, like in what?
My high school daughter that algebra.
Okay, all right.
She told me that, and I'm like, really?
Okay. So you remember that part, but maybe
Yeah, I remember
what are we actually doing with those?
You're multiplying the fraction, dividing fraction.
Okay, all right. Who's got another one? Yeah. PEMDAS. Anybody remember PEMDAS? Do we remember what that was about? And could anyone give us a word problem that involves PEMDAS?
Well, it's parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. A word problem, I could make the one up, give them a few minutes, but I
A little harder, but you know your PEMDAS. Nice job remembering PEMDAS. How about some other ones?
First in, first out. First in, last out.
Foil.
Foil. People remember that.
Happy face, smiley face.
Okay. Yeah.
That was mine, foil.
Foil. Yeah.
What's foil?
First outer.
First, outer, inner, last.
I'll show it later.
Yeah.
There's somebody back here that wants to talk about nines.
Oh, the 9 kid.
Yeah, right here.
So okay. People remember that for facts?
Yeah.
Someone want to demonstrate? How does that work?
I just learned that like 2 minutes ago.
So I'll have to do it. Okay, see if I can do it backwards. So 9 times 3 is 27. Yeah. Okay. And I think there was one over here.
Please excuse me, you're Italian.
And do you know what that connects to?
Something with algebra?
Okay.
Parentheses.
It's PEMDAS.
It's PEMDAS. So the point is to think about these things that you learned. Mary, can you remind me of yours, please? Mine is not.
This is honest. Mine is not to question why, just invert and multiply, which is how you divide fractions.
Yeah.
And we repeated it.
Yeah.
Orally.
And that's my favorite one, because we're not questioning why. We're just going to do it.
Yeah.
And if you think about these things that you memorized, think about if you know, first of all, where they came from. So could you derive this idea or this formula or this concept? And can you apply it in a situation? Or would you, if we were to give you a situation, would you know how to apply it? And just think about that. And for me, when I started teaching math, I did very well in math in school because I was great at memorizing. But when I came to teach math, and I was trying to think about how these things came about, I didn't know. And so once I started learning about how kids learn math and how I could teach math, I understood way more than I did when I was learning it. And that was really exciting to me. And that's one thing I really want to hit home tonight, is that understanding, having that insight where you go, oh, that's exciting. And I want kids to experience that. And they're not going to experience it if I'm saying ours is not the, what is it again?
Mine is not to question why, just invert and multiply.
That is not exciting. It might be the first few times, or it might be if you're all doing it together in your class. But in terms of understanding, insight is exciting, and insight sticks. And so we're trying to create opportunities for kids to discover and come to these insights. We have ways of doing that, and we're going to show a bunch of those, and Christian already has. But that's really what we want kids to experience. There's also the piece that some of us are really good at memorizing, and some of us aren't. There are lots of things that get in the way of memory. And so if we're relying on memorizing, we are excluding a whole bunch of kids. And oftentimes, when we feel like kids can't memorize, in the past, we would kind of do it louder and slower, right? And so we're going to slow it down. I'm going to say it again. Say it after me. Well, with a kid who struggles with memory, that doesn't help. So we need to have other ways for kids to understand. We need multiple ways in for them. So take a minute. Here's another quote. And this is from Adding It Up, which is a National Research Council report about the math kids need to learn and how they learn it and how we can teach it. So take a minute, and I'd like you to think about being at a party or at a gathering, and how, when you're introduced to a bunch of people, how do you remember their names?
I don't.
So think about it, talk at your table. When you're introduced to a bunch of people, how do you remember their names?
I don't. I do. Sorry, I'm not remember your name. There's 2 minutes.
How do you spell your name? That's what I do a lot.
Well, ask them to spell it, okay. How about some other ones?
Repeat
Repeat your name.
to them.
Okay, you repeat it back to them, okay. What else? Yeah.
At a memory conference, this person talked about you creating an image that's action-oriented, exaggerated, and funny. So like if I meet somebody named Pam, I can think of taking a hamburger and rubbing it on her face or something. Remember Pam.
And try not to call it ham.
Yeah, don't call her ham.
Any other ways? I don't know how you follow that one. My husband, who's a math professor at the University of Hartford and did his doctoral work on struggling learners. We had a lot of conversations about math. He talks about this as carrots and potatoes. So when you're learning, I still have an image.
We do.
There we go. When you're learning something in isolation, like lots of times I'm an introvert, so when I meet new people, I'm always a little tense. And so they'll tell me their name and I'll just immediately forget it. And the next time I see it, I'm like, I don't know what your name is. And so if I'm just trying to remember the name just by itself, that's a carrot. It's not connected to anything. When I go to pull it up, that's all there is. All I've got is the name. I've got nothing else. As opposed to these things that you're saying, you're engaging by asking the person to repeat or by spelling it, you're engaging with that name, you're making a connection. By making this image, you're creating an association in your mind with that person's name and that idea that will help you access that information. So he talks about that as potatoes. So we want kids to be making associations with the things that they're learning in math. We want them to make those connections so that when they pull up that potato, that there are other ideas connected to it that will help them understand it. And the more potatoes there are, the more roots, the greater that root system, the deeper the understanding is. So if we think about facts, so if I'm just trying to memorize 9 times 7 is 63, and that's it, all I've got is the carrot of 9 times 7. That's all I've got. So if I have a good memory, a really good memory, awesome. But I also might know it in 4th grade, and if I don't practice it, by the time I get to 8th grade, I might not know it anymore. Because I've got I'm trying to pull that up, and I got nothing. As opposed to, if I know 10 times 7, kids are really good at multiplying by 10. And so if I know that 10 times 7 is 70, and that's the potato I pull up, I can say, oh, I know 10 times 7 is 70. So if I'm trying to figure out 9 times 7, I'm going to subtract a 7, and I got 63. So I have a way to figure it out. I've made a connection that works for me. The fact I might use to figure out 9 times 7 might be different for different kids. What facts do you know? We're always asking them, what fact do you know that's going to help you figure out this one you don't know? And as Christian showed us with the equations, the different ways you thought about 119 plus 119, kids will have that many ways for figuring out 9 times 7. Another way we help kids make these connections is by thinking about situations. So, context. So a lot of the work that we're doing with kids is in context. It's not very often that we're just cranking through equations, because we want them to make sense. So if I'm thinking about yogurts, and they come in packages of 3. To make sure I have them out there. So I'm trying to figure out division. Division is tricky for kids. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, so I know yogurts come in packages of 3, and I have 12 of them. So if I'm going to divide 12 by 3, if I'm going to get those packages of 3, I'm going to say, okay, so I know I have a package here, and I have a package here, and I have a package here, and I have a package here. Oh, I have 4 packages. So models like this that you've probably seen in your students' work help them ground it in something that they understand, a situation that they understand. Another one, if we have 1 3/4 divided by a half. So ours is not the reason question why, just invert and multiply. When we have kids thinking about this, they can go back to what they know about whole number division. Okay, so here I had those groups of 3. I took out groups of 3. So if I have 1 3/4, I can take out or subtract groups of a half. So let's see, in my 1, I'm going to have how many groups of a half? 2. So 2 groups in my 1. In my 3/4, how many groups of a half do I have? 1. So now I have 3.
And a quarter.
And a quarter, which is how much of a half? Half of a half. Okay? If that didn't make sense to you, we can think about it in a familiar context. I have a recipe that calls for a half a cup of flour. I have 1 3/4 cups of flour. How many recipes can I make? So I have 1 cup here of flour, and then probably if I'm measuring my flour, I probably have a half cup measure, and then I probably have a 1/4 cup measure. So again, okay, so I've got 2 halves in there. So I've got 2 in there, there's 1 more, and I have a 1/4. If I look at that, oh, that's half of that, so that comes up to 3 1/2. Helping kids make sense of what they're doing through models and through situations that they can relate to. Questions? How am I doing? All right, so we are going to watch a quick number talk. And yeah, in a second. So we've been studying this book. We played around with it in the district. We're doing a book study on it in Jericho. And basically, it's to help kids make sense of problems in a different way. Very similar. What Christian did with you is essentially a number talk.
I don't do that.
Okay, so let's come back.
So I guess you did it backwards. Yeah.
So I hate to interrupt your conversations, but just keep us on time and moving. Anything strike you about the kids' strategies? Impressive.
Just concept for multiplication to half one and multiply it double the other.
Doubling and halving, right?
That's brilliant.
You're like, oh my God, it's so much easier. Why didn't anybody teach me that? Other thoughts?
Can I just ask a question about that
Yes.
doubling half? But there must be a rule, because you can't do it when it's odd and odd. Right? I mean,
Yes.
there's some rule that goes with that.
What's the fraction?
Well, can I, so you could
Yes,
do
but
it
gets
with odd
tricky.
and odd, but is it going to be helpful?
Right.
That's that flexibility we're talking about. It's not just learning new tricks. It's this idea of having a bag of tools that I can pull out when it's going to be helpful. Okay?
And
So, yeah, go ahead.
Just in terms of sort of the, how how applicable this is for other situations. I gotta look at my numbers. Yes. So here's another one. Getting into decimals. So give it a try. Just in your head, give this doubling and halving idea a try.
Oh,
wow.
Oh, doubling and halving.
Doubling and halving. Because using the algorithm would be a little tricky. Anyone want to be brave and say it out loud? Give it a try.
52.
Oh, for answers? So I'm going to double 3.25. What am I going to get?
6.5.
6.5 times 8.
Then double and half again.
Then I'm going to double and half again.
13 and 4.
And then I could go.
Doing it.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
I would really rather do this than this. So, and we just have been playing around with number talks at Jericho, and I had so in some classrooms it's only been like a week that we've been practicing, and we're not working with decimals at 4th grade, but I had a student do that kind of doubling, halving all the way down to 1 the other day, after just like 2 or 3 number talks. So I am blown away by our students' capability to learn when we give them, present and share ideas, a lot of which come from the students in terms of how to solve these problems. So kids pick it up and they do that thing you did. Ah, that's so much easier. That's so much more efficient. And I'm probably going to be way more accurate if I do it this way. So the big idea is we want kids to understand so that they can use what they learn in earlier grades that will build on in later grades. We want them to have potatoes so that when they pull up an idea, it's connected to all those other ideas. And we want them to solve problems in ways that make sense to them. If you felt like you weren't good at math when you were growing up, it's probably because you were taught to memorize, and maybe that was tough for you, or maybe you just don't remember the things you learned then. You probably weren't taught in this way. And we think if we are teaching kids in this way to understand, we are making mathematics accessible to way more kids, and that's really exciting.
Can I just have ask a question on that regarding like SBACs and whatever standardized testing is going to occur later on? When we were growing up, the memorizing, we were able to then do our standardized testing, no problem, very quickly. Have you found that the standardized testing that they do now, do they need more time because they need to use more time to understand the problem to get to their answer? Or do you find, I'm just curious if the standardized testing these days really measures what they know, because if it's a certain time and they need more time to get to their answer, then they're not going to get that problem correct, if you understand what I'm trying to...
Yes, so the questions are complex, or more complex.
Right.
And I think kids have the time. Yeah, Barbara, do you want to?
The SBACs are on time. So
Yeah,
students
they have the
can
time
as
they
much
need.
time as they need
Yeah.
to take whatever strategies that work or try a variety of strategies to come to what they believe is an accurate answer.
So, but does that mean, because I know my kids have been doing SBACs, but I guess I haven't asked enough questions about it. If there's no time, does that mean that kids that need more time will take, do they have that many more days to fit?
Yeah, students get to a point where they come up with an answer or a solution that they believe is accurate, and that's what they apply. And so, given the time, they come up with an answer. Whether that answer is correct or not,
Right.
but they do have the time to do that.
So when I was giving the SBAC test as a classroom teacher, we talked about working productively. You have as much time as you need to work productively. We do get to a point where I'm not working productively anymore. I don't know anymore, I'm just trying things. And so helping kids get that, also build that understanding of themselves as learners too, about where they are. All right, so if you came in after, my name is Mary Abley Austin. I am a math coach in the 2 middle schools, Browns River Middle School and Camel's Hump Middle School. I've been a math coach in districts in Waterbury, Duxbury for 15 years, and I'm new to the district here, so I'm a new face for many. but thrilled to be here and working with teachers and looking at that professional development in math with our math teachers here. The big idea that I'm looking at is this idea. And this was really important to me. This idea, it used to be that we truly believed that you either had the math gene and were good at the math, or that you weren't. You got the math gene, oh, they're just like his uncle, he's really good at math, okay? Or you weren't. The research really says that just isn't so. That what we're looking at now is we are all capable of understanding mathematics at very high levels. That doesn't mean that we all take the same path to get there. Okay, some of us will need more time for ideas to solidify in order to develop those understandings, but it's not like there's a math gene. The one thing that I say frequently to adults, and I do a lot of adult education, is people will say to me, I'm not really good at math, but I'm trying to help them with this. And so I encourage all of us not to say that. That's not helpful. The research actually says, particularly mothers that say to their kids, their daughters, I'm not really very good at math, those kids' test scores have actually been recorded as going down. It becomes okay not to be good at it. And so in a lot of our buildings we've been talking about, I'm not good at this yet. I'm just not good at it yet. It's not connecting for me yet. I'm still working to develop that understanding. Okay. I'm going to try that. Ooh, look at that. So a while ago, and not that long ago, when I was in teacher education, we really looked at math instruction. When we gave a test, we expected this bell curve. There'd be people that got it. There'd be some way at the high end that really got it, that seemed to magically understand it. And then there would always be some that didn't. That model has really changed. We operate under a model now where we are all building those understandings. Our goal is to get all students to understand multiplication, understand operating with fractions, proportional reasoning at a level. And it kind of goes like this. So you learn something new and you own it, you learn it in multiple ways, and then you grow on those ideas. It's not, our teachers are charged with everyone learning these standards, not just some. And so I ended up back in graduate school for mathematics when I was working with a student and I didn't have any more tricks I didn't have anything else to do. I knew how I understood it, but I had yet to figure out how they were going to understand it. And that's part of our job, is to help figure out what that looks like. The good news is the research has done a lot of work to help us develop those understandings. So we're working with these ideas, these big ideas called learning progressions. So it's not only like skills that progress, but there's been a lot of research about how does our brain actually learn the mathematics over time. They're big idea progressions. So kids start in K2 with additive reasoning, working with addition and subtraction. That moves into multiplicative reasoning that supports fractions, that moves into proportional, and moves us through. So we have big idea progressions that happen. But within each of those categories, if we just take multiplicative, there's this learning progression of how we actually learn that mathematics. The goal at this point is we may come in thinking about multiplication additively. 16 times 35 means 35 16 times. 35 plus 35 plus 35. Once we get to these numbers, we sure don't want them adding anymore. But when we're thinking about 4 times 3, we start that way. We develop an understanding that gets us, that builds from that additive groups into a transitional visual model strategy that eventually supports the algorithm, why the algorithm actually works, and how it works. Our goals as teachers is taking students from where they are. We want them to have multiplicative strategies in the end. But if they come in added for repeated addition for multiplication, and I show them an algorithm, if they can't remember the algorithm, we see students paper in 6th and 7th grade with 35 plus 35 plus 35, because they don't have one step back on that learning progression, all they know is to go back and add. We're building that scaffold as they go so that if they can't remember those steps, they go back to a model, but it's still efficient, not all the way back down. Okay. I'm going to share with you the multiplicative reasoning framework. I want you to know that I've got my middle school hat on for a minute, there are fractional frameworks and proportional reasoning frameworks that have looked at, through research and observation of students that are making those strong connections in math, what are they doing that is building that lasting understanding over time? What are those potatoes in those big ideas that we can link for kids so that they see when they're doing proportional reasoning where fractions play into that and where is the multiplicative in that, and can use those strategies. So I'm going to give you a framework. Actually, these guys are going to give you a framework just to take a look at. While they're passing them out, I want to just say this one other piece, and that is, when you're learning in a progression, it's not linear. It's not that you just go straight up the mountain with your strategies. It's up and down. Okay, so I may know how to multiply whole numbers, but as soon as I start multiplying fractions, I kind of go back to adding them up. And then I can learn those algorithms and those more efficient strategies for fractions. And then I get into proportional ratios and I kind of dip back down. So it's growth over time that we're looking for students. An analogy of this is I have an 18-year-old at home who is a driver with their own car, and driving in mud is very different, which is what my road looks like right now, than driving on a road. And so when he was learning to drive, the 10 and 2, you sit up straight, right? No radio, you're paying close attention. When the road gets really muddy, we go back to that. I go back to that on my way home. I sit up straight, I turn off the radio, I put my hands on 10 and 2, because it's not as clear anymore. I need to pay more attention. I go back to those strategies I know. Okay. What I want you to do is on your own on a piece of paper, I want you to solve 27 times 39. I did make them odd numbers on purpose, okay? Because that doubling and halving is really slick, but maybe not our best strategy for this one. Think about how you would solve this yourself.
The other way,
So there's a lot of different strategies.
27 times 4, add a 0, and then you have to subtract 27.
Do girls' brains think less abstractly than it when you get up into algebra?
So, I don't think it's necessarily gender-based. I think that there are really different thinkers, and there are some students that are drawn to making connections and looking at how things fit together. I have one son who's like taken apart every motor in the house possible. That's his brain, right? His other brother doesn't. That's not, yet they're both deep thinkers, just differently. They think about it differently. Culturally, our culture is find an answer fast. The bottom line is when you look at like Silicon Valley who are hiring high-tech positions, they don't want the answer fast people. They said, I've got Google to do that. What I need is somebody who can problem solve and parse out multiple. I want us to, I was able to listen to a couple different conversations, but I want to take a look at how some students are doing this. Because it's important to realize that as the content rigor increases, as kids go up in grades, this same unpacking for understanding and making meaning of the operations and the work they're doing continues. So here's one student's way of doing it. How many people have seen this model from their student, if you have a student in that grade? This is called an area model, and where is it on your framework? Transitional. This area model that's transitional allows students to pay attention to what happens when I'm multiplying 20 and 30. I'm getting 600, which is a bigger area space than when I multiply 9 times 7. This is a visual model of the kinds of, and then what I've done to students, I said, well, if it was 227 times 39, how many areas would you have? And kids start to visualize and be able to think about those areas without needing to draw all of them. This is rooting their understanding in the place value they already have. It's rooting their understanding in what they already know about using powers of 10 numbers, 20, 40, 60, 700, 800 times a single digit number. Using that understanding, but keeping track of those parts. This student isn't drawing the rectangle anymore. But what's the same about this that was in the last one?
It's the same function, it's just that they haven't drawn the rectangle.
Yeah. They're moving to a more efficient method of, I don't actually have to draw all the boxes anymore. I can think about, let me go back, think. I can think about these dimensions as 20 and 7 and 30 and 9. I can do that decomposing in my head and move to doing, this is called partial products. I can do a piece of it at a time based on place value. But I'm still writing out every equation to get there, to make sure I have them all. This is to moving more efficient. And this is an algorithm. One of the things that's been very interesting to me in my work with mathematics, especially at higher levels, is there is not just one algorithm. In fact, textbooks are now saying things like the traditional United States algorithm. I had a student move in from Brazil, and she had a way to multiply decimals that was absolutely an algorithm, but was not one I knew. There are over 19 different algorithms for subtraction. Algorithms actually came to be after World War II. We created those algorithms after World War II so that everybody would follow doing it the same way so we could follow each other's thinking. It's actually fairly new to have that algorithm. But you can see the student is continuing to think about the magnitude of the numbers with place value. They don't need the boxes anymore, and they don't have to write all those equations out anymore either. They're building that efficiency. Can you find partial products up at the top? It is a multiplicative strategy. You can also see doubling and halving up there. These are tools we're putting in our students' tool belts in order to be able to be flexible and efficient, given the context and the numbers they have. Eventually, we link that partial product algorithm to the traditional algorithm. The traditional algorithm is actually really helpful when we start trying to do multiplying of decimals. This last one, when you're doing decimals, it's really easy to get, there's a whole lot of opportunity for error. So it's not that we want to, this is still a goal. It's not that the goal has changed, it's how we get there that matters. We still need our students to understand this, but not really until the end of 5th grade, beginning of 6th grade. To actually own this idea of efficiency. And both of these are considered algorithms and sense making. And you can imagine, one of the things I hear teachers say all the time is your answer reasonable? And you're like, I don't know, I did all the steps, looks reasonable to me. It feels like I did the right thing. When you keep the magnitude of the number in your problem solving, you can imagine about how much this should be. So I want to just share with you something that I've done with our teachers, and that is, it's not that the traditional algorithm isn't a good idea. It just hides a lot of a lot of understanding. So Karen has said that she'll do this with me. She and I are going to do 27 times 39 with the traditional algorithm, okay? But I'm going to she's willing to do this, and we've practiced this. So I'm going to interrupt her as she's talking. So what do you do first, Karen?
9 times 7.
And what do you get?
63.
And what do I do?
Put down the 3 and carry the 6.
But that 6 isn't really a 6. It's 60. Keep going.
9 times 2.
But it's not really 2, it's 20.
And then you write down 18.
Not yet.
9 times
9 times 2 is 18.
18.
Plus 6.
Plus 6. Oh, right. See?
It's hard to do with an audience.
practice
9
that
times 2 is 18. Is it really 18?
No.
No, it's not really 18. And I add 6, but it's not really 6.
And
what
I
do you
get
get?
24.
But it's not really 24.
Then I put a 0.
Who knows why? You just learn the rules. Then what do you do?
Then I do 3 times 7.
But it's not really a 3.
And I get 21, and
But
I
it's
put
not
down
really
the 1.
21, and it's not really 1.
And I carry the 2.
And but I gotta cross that one out, right? And I carry a 2, but it's not really a 2.
And then I do 3 times 2.
Not a 3, not a 2.
Which is 6. And then I add the 2.
Which isn't really 2.
Which is 8. And then I write the 8 down.
Which isn't really 8. The traditional algorithm takes all that place value understanding and hides it. So unless I've got strong command of my place value understanding, I can try and do this, but that's a lot of rules if I don't have the understanding to back it up. If we look at these two partial sums, if I go back and look at this student, let's see if I can go back, I did. Can you find the 810 in here?
Yeah.
What is it?
600 and 210.
It's the 600 and the 210. And when they're making that area model, they find it and see, oh, we're just doing 2 steps in one. I'm combining those 2 steps because that's really when I'm doing my 30 times 27 gives me those 2 pieces. So our goal is to link that understanding for students so that they understand where it goes. That area model continues to grow with students to when we're multiplying 2 different expressions in algebra. The area model is a robust model that continues to be effective. Can anybody think about what you might put in those partial products?
6x squared.
Well, I'm thinking this area is 2x times 3x, which is going to give me what?
6x squared.
That's going to give me 6x squared. And this partial is 3 times 3x, which gives me
9x.
And this is 4 times 2x.
8x.
And this is 4 by 3.
12.
Think about how this, and here's FOIL, first, right? So that that's an acronym that only works when it's 2 terms times 2 terms. As soon as I say, I'd like you to solve 2x plus 3y plus 4 times 2x plus 8, it doesn't work anymore. This is the distributive property, and it's a visual model of it, and a robust model that they start with early in multiplication and can continue using as a support all the way through. That's what we're working to develop.
Mary, did you say too that this model is not just another trick? That if you were making a basketball court, this model would make sense of how many tiles you were going to put on the gym floor as well. So it's not the holding place for my work, but also visually in the real world, when you're talking about area, this makes sense as well. If you're a farmer with a field, this model makes sense as well. So it's not just, we made some boxes. We made some boxes for you to put your answers in. It's actually that this is satisfactory not only as a strategy, but also this is satisfactory as a model, like a blueprint.
For area. So the bigger idea is that it's not that all students, we either have the math gene or we don't. It's that all students are looking at where are they on that progression. Teachers are analyzing. There it is. Teachers are teaching to students, They're giving an assessment and they're analyzing that assessment, looking at learning progressions and saying, where are you now and what's your next right step in developing that understanding? The goal is still getting everybody there, but the route that you take and how quickly you move through a learning progression will depend on your learning style. But everybody is capable of reaching those high points. The work we're doing in classes, in professional development, in the work we're doing with teachers, all three of us work on this piece of teaching and assessing and analyzing where they are and then adjusting your instruction. These kids need this next step. This group needs this next step so that everybody continues to grow in their learning. I want to say thanks for coming. We're still going to be here if you have questions.